All right, welcome back. The Battle of Cedar Mountain from the Twin Peaks box of GMT. We just finished the 1700 game turn, and quite a lot has actually changed in these front lines. I made a few notes to myself about some of the things in the game that I wanted to go over before I got into the fight. I think at the start I said that the cavalry, I think on the first turn, was only going to have two activations, but the cavalry on both sides is in the rules is completely independent, and they get all three of their activations. I imagine if they go combat ineffective, they'll only get two. I learned a lot about shock combat and continued shock, and what it can do to an enemy, and what it can do to the attacker conducting the shock if he has to keep continuing. And I'll give you an explanation of what happened with that particular function over here on the Union right. Disorder causing casualties. This is unique. You go back to the old Terrible Swift Sword or the old SPI Great Battles. You fire, you kill 100, maybe you get some artillery in canister range and they fire and you might kill 200 or 300. I notice in this game here, unless you roll extremely high, you don't necessarily get numbered casualties off the fire table. Usually you get a disorder or a chance to disorder, but then you fire a second unit thing and it could be a 1 strength unit and he gets a disorder result, and that unit's already disordered, he rolls again, next thing he's taking a loss. Or you might get a high roll where they get a casualty point loss or maybe 2 and a disorder. Well, the unit was already disordered, so now they're going to take a third loss or a second loss or a fourth loss, and they're going to retreat back. So system's great. It can keep the fight going, or it can just totally wreck an attack with those. And I really love that part of the system. Something I learned is when you're in attack mode, you want to maintain contact with the enemy that you are attacking. The reason I say that is when I say maintain contact, I mean you want to be in that zone of control so that if they pull out, if they withdraw, you can get shots at them. The retreat rules in this game, you can't shoot at them when they just simply retreat in their movement phase or in their activation. But if they withdraw because they just can't stand the heat anymore, you're going to get shots at them with everything that's adjacent. So that's why I say maintain contact, maintain that zone of control if you're on the attack. Confederate artillery activations compared to the Union's artillery activations. All right, so the Union artillery in this game is in its own brigade, and they actually have a leader for the 2nd Corps artillery. You can assign a battery or a certain number of sections from a battery to any brigade, and they will activate with that brigade. Or they remain under the command of the artillery commander. But I think the rules on this say that if they're within range of the corps commander, I probably need to get a clarification on that, because why have that artillery brigade commander if they activate off the corps commander? But on the other hand, the Confederate artillery, they can activate off of any brigade commander's activation within their division. So any artillery in Ewell's division can activate off of any brigade commander they're within range of, or the division commander. Or they can also activate if they're within Jackson's command range. So I haven't seen an explicit rule about that saying that, under those conditions, these guys can literally activate like 6 times and fire like 6 times. And then throw rapid fire in there when that needs that. That's an awful lot of firepower. Now, maybe it's meant to be like that. I'm going to get some clarification on that too. Fatigue. I still haven't gotten too far into that. I have one unit that is at a fatigue level 1, I believe, but I don't think he's going to get into any combat here. He's just going to end up moving. And I could just sit him stationary for a full turn and get that fatigue back. But until you get 1 or 2, I was just reading this last night, it really doesn't affect anything in combat, because I can't remember if you round it down or round it up on the die rolls. It affects die roll modifiers is what it does. Combat ineffectiveness. All right, so brigade combat ineffectiveness means if that division gets 3 activations, that brigade only gets 2. Other than that, I don't see any other negative effects on the unit. Other than if they're brigade combat ineffective, they're pretty much shot up anyhow. If a division is ineffective, then the whole division loses 1 activation. Back to fatigue. So if you have 2 activations and you just do your normal thing, you move or you fire, either once or in both activations, or you shock one time in those first 2 activations, you don't gain any fatigue. But if you shock a second time, no matter what activation, you start gaining fatigue, and you can gain any number of fatigue levels for shock combat. For activations, for any function other than shock, a unit suffers the maximum of 2 fatigue levels per turn. So they can have 4 activations. If they don't do any shock combat, the most fatigue levels that they can suffer in a turn is 2. So keep that in mind when you play. The rules really aren't that tough. I mean, just like any other game, though, you got a few gray areas that you have to research, or maybe get on Console World or message the game creator, email the game creator, and try to get a clarification. All right, so let's get into what has happened here in the fight. I'm going to take you over here to the charts first. You see the Confederate or the Union took a few more regimental losses, another battery gone. Okay, 2 more regiments actually, and another battery gone. Good old Jubal Early. He lost 3 regiments, and you can see the size of that one regiment, a good 400 men right there. So there's 700 men sitting right there. I mean, just completely gone. All right. So the Confederates got their march activation early in the turn before too much else anything happened. So A.P. Hill, his remaining stuff, or most of his, or the second half of his stuff comes on. Well, at the time, good old Jube was sitting here in the woods where you see him being ineffective right now. And he had not started his attack. So he had this whole left side covered. He has a good brigade, plus he's aggressive, and he's got, a +2 for his die roll modifiers, or for his orders modifiers? So I said, well, I don't need A.P. Hill over there. Let's bring A.P. Hill in the middle of the battlefield. Well, you can see by the looks of this that A.P. Hill may not need to be in the middle of the battlefield. So now what I'm thinking is eventually Pope is going to come on over here with all the rest of these units at dusk, 3rd Corps, dusk and nightfall, and they're going to come in up here. And this is going to be the Union's attempt to recover what they're losing coming down that pike, I'm sure. So might not be a bad idea that if I don't have to get A.P. Hill engaged, so that there is a force to actually meet that 3rd Corps when they come on. Right. I have to think about that. I have to see how the next couple turns develop, whether they need to be used or not. All right, so Early, he's combat ineffective. He's still got a little bit of juice in him, but I don't foresee him attacking anything over here. This part of the 1st Division over here, the 3rd Brigade, they're not in too bad shape. They're not in any danger of being ineffective. But I will tell you what happened here is old Jube charged out, and he went at these 2 gun positions in the infantry right in the middle. And you see it's kind of a weird setting right there. He actually assaulted the top guns right there with infantry, won the fight, drove them out, took over that gun position, which abandoned those guns, drove the infantry back. Then he drew a continued shock because I think he rolled like a 10. So after rolling a 10, he had to continue to shock any units in his front. So he did a little half turn to the left, and he went after 2 more units. And he threw an 8 and drove them back. So he had to continue again. Although in that process, he had 1 unit that ended up having to back off. So he's down to 2 units. So he shocked 1 more time. And the bigger unit of the 2 got pushed back, and the smaller unit was a 2. He stayed in place. Or no, he ended up backing up 1. And then the Union defender got the ability to advance and for him to continue shock. His option, he didn't have to. So he advanced back into the position where the guns were. And so within 1 activation, the guns were abandoned, and then they were pretty much recovered and put back into use. So I kind of wish I would have took a picture of this area right here, because, I mean, this was a shambles. There was a 3 hex wide gaping hole in Gordon's brigade up here, and you can see there's some collapsed units sitting back here. There's actually quite a few collapsed units sitting back here. The cavalry is no longer ineffective, so I'm just keeping them back here. I got to figure I'm going to need them later. The first division, they're holding their own, but this hole right here in the middle of this battlefield, unless these guys can collapse a little bit or back off and then consolidate a little bit, Ewell is just going to overrun them completely. I mean, he's just going to blow right up the pike and take that intersection, and who knows how much farther they can go after that. It's going to put the first division over here, it's going to put them in a mess. So right now, trying to back out through those woods when they're doing such a good job there that's going to be difficult. Another option is they could just swing straight ahead or swing to their left and crash into the side of Winder, because I don't know if old Jubal Early is going to be strong enough to hold them back. Winder's still probably good 60-65% effective. And Hill's 1st Brigade on the battlefield, Thomas, well, he's moving up through the middle. Bev Robertson went up here and didn't pull off any charges, but got to do some shocks, just normal shocks of cavalry, and through that hole in there. So you see what it's done to the 2nd Division from the 2nd Corps. They're having to fall back. No option. They're just not up there. You figure this whole brigade down here from Ewell, he's going to, I got to get him out of attack mode. I can't seem to get him out of attack orders and get him moved up here with the rest of the division. Artillery, they're just doing their thing. I think the Confederates have lost maybe 2 guns. And you see they've knocked out 2 complete batteries from the Union. So, game face has changed. The Confederates are going to stay on the attack through the middle there, I'm sure. It wouldn't make any sense to back off now. They need to just mess up as much as they can what Union troops are here. APL, like I say, I'll have to think about that. He's still got more troops coming on this turn. So, that's going to be a full division on the board here shortly that hasn't been touched yet. Although I think Thomas's brigade here in the middle, they're going to get into the fight. I did not get them into attack mode yet. Not sure if I will. I might not need to. Maybe let Winder finish up, see if he can't break that pike wide open. Because there's really not much there to stop him. All right, victory points. So, see, that's changed on this turn. Confederates now have 4 victory locations, and the Union only has a 1-point victory location. They don't get a point for the back victory location here. The Confederates will get 2 if they take it. And then, of course, when the game is over, you get points for wrecked units or combat ineffective stuff. I have to read the rules on that. There's like 2 paragraphs or 2 sentences on that. It's pretty easy to figure out. All right, well, that's the latest on this. Whole lot of new things learned. And we'll might go ahead and post this one up since it's almost 15 minutes. And since so much has changed. And I'll get back after the 1745 game turn's done. See you then.